Hello and welcome to the Core Outdoors Speaker Series. I'm your host, adventure journalist Jamie Moy. Core Outdoors is a collective of gear designers, makers, and manufacturers based here in the mountainous Kootenay region of British Columbia. Once a month, Core produces its free webinar to share knowledge and to build relationships. Today, I'm so delighted to be joined by Ali Wines. Ali is the former executive director of Protect Our Winners Canada. She's the founder of Uncommon Ground, a Toronto-based communications agency specializing in sustainability and environmental storytelling for purpose-driven businesses and nonprofits. She's also one of my personal heroes in the outdoor industry for her authenticity and leadership, her ability to cut through greenwashing, and her skiing. Ellie, it's so great to have you here. Thanks so much for being with us.
Oh, Jamie, thanks so much for the lovely intro. It's great to be here.
I'm going to ask you to please share your screen. And while you're doing that, just a quick housekeeping note. If you have questions that arise during Ellie's presentation, that's great. Just please feel free to save them until the end, and we'll do a proper Q&A after Ellie's presentation.
Perfect. Thanks, Jamie. Does that screen look right to you?
Yep, looks great.
Excellent. This is why we do the tech check. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I was hoping to come out last year to the summit in the Kootenays, and unfortunately had some family stuff mean that I couldn't make it. So it's really nice to be able to be here and connect with you all today. Um, a couple of things briefly. I told Jamie, but I unfortunately came down with bronchitis on the weekend. So if I suddenly go mute, it's just because I need to cough, and you guys don't need to hear that sound. And yes, you do hear an accent. I was born in Australia originally. I've lived in Canada for the last 9 years. For most of that time, I have, as Jamie mentioned, run my business Uncommon Ground, which does sustainability, climate, and environmental communications for purpose driven brands and nonprofits. I took a very happy 2 year hiatus from that to lead Protect Our Winters Canada. Really fantastic opportunity to just connect more deeply with the outdoors community, and kind of live a whole bunch of my passions at once. So I'm very grateful to have been able to do that. I'm here today to talk to you about some of the stuff that I suspect you've been dealing with in your roles and that you've no doubt been seeing in the media in terms of what is actually happening with sustainability. We're seeing so many stories about, it's not happening anymore. We need to change what we call it. Yes, it is happening. There's just a bunch of confusion out there. And I think that's really been exacerbated by some of the political situations that we're seeing at the moment, some of the economic situations. So, we're going to talk a little bit about that and hopefully give you guys some clarity about what it is that consumers are actually looking for when it comes to sustainability, how you can connect with them in times that are perhaps a little bit more challenging than what we've experienced in the past, and hopefully some practical tips as well. I try not to kind of dump a bunch of theory on you, but hopefully some of the guidelines and tips that we go through at the end will be useful to help you connect with your clients and the audiences that you deal with every day. So, yeah, we're in weird times. We're experiencing so many mixed signals. There's so much confusion out there in the market. I think people are really unsure what's happening. We're hearing that investors are wary of sustainability claims. We're hearing about greenwashing. Does Canada have greenwashing laws or not right now? That's all shifted and changed. We're hearing conversely that Canadians just haven't given up on climate action, but they think everyone else has. So, I don't think that I need to tell you this. There's been months and months of market confusion, mixed messages about tariffs and inflation, just causing this substantial upheaval that's really disproportionately impacting smaller brands. I think particularly manufacturing brands, exporting brands. It's really difficult, and it's hard to know what customers want when things are shifting so quickly. So yeah, I'm sure many of you can relate to that. Oh, there we go. So I thought it might be helpful just to look at well, a little more closely at what's happening. Um, it's not surprising in these uncertain times that people's priorities are changing and that trust in social institutions like government, business, the media is starting to drop. I think we can all feel that a little bit in our personal lives. The grocery bills are going up. We see so many mixed messages on mainstream media, social media. We have AI entering the mix, which kind of makes us question everything that we see in a new and different way. So, what we do know is that, yeah, the environment has dropped down the public's priority list as the cost of living and economic insecurity take number one place. So, that's been happening for probably the last 12 or 18 months. We've seen that drop. This is reflected in the fact that two-thirds of people globally are worried about their job security. And we're seeing, that's a reasonable concern. We're seeing inflation concerns come up. We're seeing limited investment in production and in labor. People are just kind of holding their cards pretty close to their chest right now, waiting for a little bit more certainty. Then at the social level, we're seeing trust in online messages plummeting. We're seeing media fragmentation. We don't all get our media from the same sources now. So what I hear in my day to day might be completely different to what you're hearing. We're getting so much misinformation, disinformation, and polarization. And the result of that is it's really eroding our trust in the information that we're able to access right across the board. That's obviously particularly true for messages in an online context. That trust is actually at an all-time low. Consumers are particularly concerned in that sphere about mis and disinformation, deep fakes, and AI generated content. This is really aligned as well with a loss of trust in business. So in 2021, just 4 years ago, people trusted businesses more than at any other time. It's kind of hard to believe. And today we're seeing that 68% of people, nearly two-thirds of people, believe that businesses purposely mislead consumers. I, oh, my share just completely vanished. Um, Jamie, I'm getting a message saying sharing is not turned on. I'll send a share request.
Oh,
Let's,
sorry, that was a technical glitch, I think, on my end. It should come right back.
no worries. Can you see that now?
Yep. Sorry, Ellie.
Perfect. No, no worries at all. All good. Um, yeah, I just wanted to pause on that stat for a moment because I think that's kind of incredible that we have such a high percentage of people believing that business leaders knowingly lie. It's not like they're kind of accidentally sending out the wrong information or they're kind of negligent about whether this may or may not be the truth. People believe it's deliberate. My sense is that that statistic probably mostly relates to the top end of the market, your big banks and insurance companies, those kinds of guys. But I think it's really important as business owners for all of us to bear this in mind that we're operating in a really low trust environment. Equally, the majority of people hold grievances against the government, against business, and against the rich. So it's kind of a pretty grim picture. Things are looking, uncertain out there. Um, but I think the plus side that we need to think about is that this is a really great opportunity for businesses that are high trust businesses that do have a really loyal customer base, that do operate with integrity at the heart of everything that they do. There's a huge opportunity for these sorts of brands to stand out and to fill that trust gap that's being left by others as they back away from what they say their values are. So that was the crappy stuff. I don't want to depress you, so I feel like we should talk about some of the good stuff as well. So while we saw that statistic that climate has slipped down Canadians' priority list, overall, there's actually a 15-point increase in people's level of concern about climate change. This has probably been driven by some of the big events we've seen over the past 12 and 18 months, the Texas flooding, many of the wildfires that we've had across Canada over the last couple of summers. This aligns with the fact that 80% of people globally want stronger action on climate. So that's huge. Most of us think that the people around us don't care as much as we do. That's a statistic, that's a genuine fact. But in fact, studies done by the United Nations across every single country on Earth, massive population level studies, have consistently shown that between 8 and 9 out of 10 people everywhere want more to be done about climate. A similar number want more environmental and social information from businesses. They want to understand what the businesses are doing to address these environmental and social concerns. And they're showing that with their wallets. So they're looking actively to purchase from more sustainable brands. They just want to have information that they can trust. They want to find a way to navigate through a lot of the, frankly, BS that's out there and to find trustworthy organizations that reflect their own values back to them and that they can feel personally aligned with. We're also seeing that this climate concern is playing a key role in macro level decision making. So, despite what you might see and what the headlines show about, the big splashy stuff happening in the US, rollback of major climate legislation, seems like something new is happening every day. Smaller markets and overseas markets are not following that path. So, in states like California, Vermont, and Washington, they're continuing to move ahead with really significant regulations on things like PFAS, extended producer responsibility, sustainable packaging, all those sorts of things. And the same is happening in Europe. We're seeing them to continue to maybe not as strongly and vocally as previously, but continuing to roll out regulations related to sustainability and reach a level of market maturity there around that where it just becomes a standard consumer expectation. Equally, a lot of the big retailers are not backing away from what's important in this space. We see MEC, REI, Target, even Bass Pro, which caters to a pretty conservative market base in a lot of places, are asking more and more about their suppliers' sustainability practices. They know that this matters to their consumers. And I think probably even more importantly, they know that it matters to their investors. So they need to be able to have products on their shelves that they can put into their own sustainability reports and say, yes, this aligns with our goals. This is helping us to reduce our overall carbon footprint, reduce waste, whatever those goals might be. So, not as grim a picture, perhaps, as it might seem. Those headlines are always pretty much tending towards the negative. I think it's really important that we retain this perspective and know that the vast majority of people out there care. This is particularly true in cough break. One moment. Try and make it go away with water. This is particularly true in the Canadian outdoor space. I did a very small scale survey through my own company last year, just asking people a lot of these questions. Do they care about sustainability? Is it a factor in their purchasing decisions? Will they be willing to pay a little bit more to purchase from a sustainable brand? And it was really consistently strong. 90 to 95% of people felt that sustainability was a central concern when they're making a purchasing decision. And those are specifically outdoor consumers. And I think that makes sense. We're all out there in the environment every day. We can see the changes that are happening in front of us. And it matters to us to try and keep those places as healthy and as long lasting as we possibly can. So, big takeaway, sustainability isn't going away. despite all of the noises, this train has left the station and regulations and greater consumer awareness are continuing to drive progress. Might be a little quieter, but it's still happening. This means that sustainable businesses have an opportunity to secure an advantage, gaining both market share and reputational rewards for walking the talk on their green credentials. And consumers want this. None of us want to live in a low trust world. I think we're all experiencing a low grade, constant level of stress right now, just seeing the constant to and fro with changing laws. Something new seems to be happening every day. The headlines are so dramatic. It's exhausting, and people are looking for a little bit of a safe port in the storm, for a brand and a voice that they can trust to act with integrity, to be consistent. This is from a study done by a big global PR firm. You might know them already, Edelman. Ironically, they're not the most strong in their own brand reputation on trust and integrity, but they do a really fantastic survey every year called the Trust Barometer. And when they broke down the Canadian data, they noted, this is for 2025, they noted that Canadians increasingly believe that businesses are failing to address pressing societal issues. And so they offer this advice: to meet these expectations, businesses must clarify their role, take meaningful action, and advocate for solutions that foster trust. And I think that's the really core part of this. If you talk about sustainability in a vacuum, it's hard for consumers to join the dots between what your brand does and why it aligns with, this kind of environmental social issue that they care about. So using your communication strategy to build that case, join the dots for them, help them to understand why it is that your brand has a role in creating a better world and protecting the world that we currently have. So I think the data show that the question for brands isn't necessarily should we keep talking about sustainability. It's a pretty resounding yes, just based on the numbers. But the question is, how should we keep talking about sustainability? And that's really what I wanted to cover with you today. So the three approaches that I always recommend are consistency, authenticity, and empathy. Consistency is really crucial for building trust. Brands that go quiet on their green commitments, pull back on their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, as we've seen so much of, just lose that consumer trust. And while you might not see it reflected in the bottom line immediately, over time, consumers know that they have a different choice. And they remember who stuck by their values and who flip-flopped or went quiet when things mattered the most. So keep talking about what matters to your brand, show that those values haven't changed, and help to join those dots. It's really helpful too to just explain why it continues to matter when people are feeling like, their pockets are kind of hurting a little bit from the affordability crisis that everyone is experiencing right now. Helping people to understand that often the sustainable choice is the more durable choice. It's the more repairable choice, that it's going to help them out in the long run and that you see their concerns and understand them. That's a really, really helpful way to connect those issues in people's minds. Equally, authenticity is a huge trust builder because it's about being real and human. I think there's this kind of unspoken pressure out there that we should tell our sustainability stories in the same way as others do. Obviously, in this industry, everyone looks to the Patagonias and the Cotopaxis and tries to do maybe a light version of that style of communication. I don't think we need to do that. And I don't think we need to be earnest, and we don't need to be data driven, talking about kilowatts of energy saved or liters of water. It's kind of boring. What really helps is just telling your story. Like, why does this matter to your brand? Tell your founder story. You started this business for a reason and you built sustainability into it for a reason. helping people to understand what that story is really builds those trusted relationships over time. Equally, there are so many organizations that feel that they can't talk about their sustainability work because they haven't made enough progress. Nothing could be further from the truth. Sharing where you're at now, talking about both the challenges and the opportunities that you have in your business when it comes to sustainability, it is just such a fantastic way to build support because it's honest. In a world where there is so much greenwashing, and there is a bunch of it, I think the numbers show something like 70% of global executives admit that their brands greenwash. You can be the island in that ocean and talk in a really authentic and meaningful way. And the way that I love to see brands talk about this, and I wish people did more of, was talk about your stuff ups. Talk about the times when things went wrong, or you made a mistake, or that you wish you had done things differently. Because we're all human, we've all done that. Every single one of us, in our own businesses, can think of times where something went wrong, or we wished we'd approached a problem in a different way. And that's incredibly relatable and such a strong and powerful way to build trust with a consumer. The final one is empathy. We talked about a little bit about this a moment ago. Just acknowledging the reality of where people are at right now with financial pressures, social pressures, all of the things going on in the world that are hard to hold and challenging to deal with. Speaking to people about that rather than pretending that it doesn't exist helps your audience to feel seen. It helps your audience to feel like you genuinely care about them, because I think most of us as small businesses genuinely very much do care about the people that exist in our world. So just being very real about that is really helpful. And when it comes to your marketing communications, addressing those concerns, as we mentioned, focusing on things like durability, value, particularly right now, Canadian pride is huge. I think most of us would much rather buy from a Canadian brand, particularly a sustainable one, than one from the other side of the border at the moment. And avoid moralizing. I see so many sustainability communications that feel a little bit preachy. They feel a little bit like holier than thou. It's really off-putting, and people kind of sniff that from a mile away. So just kind of connecting with people where they're at, showing that, hey, I've got the same values as you. Here's something that might help you in your pursuits, whatever it is that you're trying to connect with them on, in a really real way. So I was trying to avoid mentioning Patagonia, but it's always hard not to. I do really like what they do because they act with integrity. They're honest. So this is Ginando, their marketing manager. He says everyone here, from Yvonne to the product designers, talks about that tension. And he's talking about the tension of being a business that sells stuff to people and makes stuff and markets, which obviously has a carbon footprint. It's hard to live in a capitalist world and not have some sort of footprint, especially if your role is selling something. So they get this kind of difficult, challenging question all the time. What I really like, and why I wanted to share this quote, was they don't shy away from it. They don't pretend to be something that they're not. They're not a non-profit. They do exist to make money. The Earth might be their largest shareholder these days, but they still remain essentially a for-profit business, as most of us are. So I like the fact that they just tackle that head on. So there's a theory. I hope you guys feel like you understand why it's important to keep talking about sustainability, and that there is actually huge value in that, that our customers out there want us to keep having these conversations, to be that beacon of integrity in what can feel like a bit of a dark world at the moment. So I next wanted to just dive into how you go about doing that. So give me a break for water. I'm about 90% ibuprofen right now, which is trying me out a little bit. Thanks for being patient with me. So, when I speak to slightly more corporate audiences, I call this slide by another name, but this is the essentially the do I give a frick slide. Often, when we talk about climate and sustainability issues, there's a tendency to go right out to kind of the end of people's care spectrum and start talking about the planet or the environment. It's really remote. It doesn't create an emotional connection for people when we start talking about that. It's become a kind of shorthand where people understand the context, but there's no emotional resonance for people. As humans, we all have this kind of finite bucket of mental emotion and emotional energy that we can give to any particular issue. We make 32,000 decisions a day from the moment that we wake up to the moment that we go to bed. Our brains are pretty tired. They're constantly processing and they're constantly doing this analysis of, is this important enough for me to give energy to today? So we need to find a way to craft our messages to help people's brains say, yes, this does matter. I do want to give my care and attention to it. So naturally, as humans, we care about our own needs first. We care about our health. We care about our financial and social well-being and that of our closest, most immediate family. Next out in this kind of circle of care structure, we typically have a bit of energy left to care about what happens in our community. We care about our neighbours, we care about our friends and colleagues. Maybe we care about a local river cleanup or contributing to our kids' school, whatever's happening that we can see, touch, and feel in our most immediate vicinity. And it's really only after that that we start to think about or invest our energy in the wider issues in the world. And so that's kind of when we start to lose people, when we use this distant language like the planet and the environment. People might say, on a checkbox, like, yes, I do care about that. But when it comes to that decision making of, do I care enough to buy this product today, sign this petition today, it's often going to feel a little bit remote. So we want to bring it back to the things that they care most closely about. The foundations of good communication when it comes to sustainability. There's a bit of overlap with kind of what are general good communication principles, but there's some specific stuff that kind of touches on issues that can perhaps be a little bit polarizing or feel a little bit political to people at times, but thinking about ways that we can kind of really help them to care, to be on our side, to kind of march in lockstep with us about these things that really matter. So, to try and break this down, I created this framework for my clients. This is based on the latest research into effective communication strategies, specifically related to climate and sustainability topics. Don't worry about the tiny print. I know it's very, very small. I'm going to walk through it just very quickly. I want to make sure I'm leaving enough time for questions at the end. But I've also got a QR code for you at the end where you can download your own copy of this. And I can give Jamie a link as well if that's easier. So, foundations of a good sustainability message, really knowing your audience. If many of you are marketers in the call today, you'll kind of know the basic audience persona. I think when we're talking about sustainability and climate issues, it's really helpful to go a little bit deeper than that and to really understand important questions about your audience's identity, what their values are, how that kind of manifests with their relationship with the world around them. Really kind of diving into what are their values. As part of that too, I think we often think about what will motivate someone to make a sustainable choice. I really encourage everybody to think about what will stop them. What are the barriers that might make them not want to make this choice? People most often default to price on this sort of thing, but that's not actually always the case. Sometimes it's confusion about whether the product is actually sustainable or not. Sometimes it's information overload. Sometimes it's access. So just understanding what those barriers might be can really help you frame communication for folks in a way that helps them make a choice that's really sustainable. Relevance here is crucial, connecting your sustainability message to your business's goals. Like we spoke about earlier, talking about it in a vacuum without connecting it back to what your business really stands for can feel confusing for people. So, just helping your audience understanding why sustainability matters. A vision is really helpful here. Just painting a picture of the future that you're working towards with your sustainability strategy. We can get really caught up in the numbers and the minutiae. And while that might help us kind of measure our progress over time, it's not particularly inspiring. So when we talk about, a world where our kids and grandkids can hike the same trails as us, where we can share a family ski day 30 years into the future, whatever that vision looks like for you, communicating that shows your integrity, shows you mean it, shows you've thought about it, but it also helps your audience to feel like there's this kind of hopeful sense of a future that we can all work towards together. And that's really, really inspiring to people. We know that that is a big motivator in helping people to make those choices. We stick to the negative, people tend to shut down a little bit. Painting that positive vision inspires them to take action. And finally, storytelling. Like we spoke about earlier, sticking to the numbers and facts isn't going to really motivate people. None of us get super worked up about that stuff. But when you frame it as a story, giving that kind of narrative arc, have a strong character, telling people the why, that's what really connects. And that's what helps people feel connected to you and your brand. I may not spend too much time on this slide because I'm going to give you access to the document and I want to make sure that you can all have plenty of time to ask questions. But these are what I consider the key components of an effective sustainability message. The first is defining the problem. What is it that you're trying to fix? Why is it a problem? Is it plastic waste? Is it food miles? Is it something else? Helping people to understand why something matters is the first step to getting them on board to wanting to solve the problem with you. We've spoken a lot about our shared values. So building your narrative around the things that all of us care about. We all care about our family. We all care about our health. We all care about creating a happy future. Relatable people and places is a really big one. I think those pictures of polar bears on melting ice maybe tugged at the heartstrings 30 years ago, but bringing it much closer to home and showing images of people and local settings that your audience can identify with helps them to understand that this isn't a faraway problem, that this is something that's happening right here, right now in our own communities. Plain language, I cannot emphasize enough. Jargon, academic language, big long words just get in the way of people trying to understand your message. I always recommend to people to aim for a fourth or fifth grade reading level when they're talking about climate and sustainability, not to be patronizing or because audiences aren't smart and they can't understand the topic, but because, as we spoke about earlier, our brains are just operating at max capacity all the time. So keeping it as simple as possible just takes away that cognitive effort of trying to decode a slightly complicated, maybe sciencey kind of message. Keep it simple. Focusing on the solutions. We talk so much in this field about what the problems are, and that is important, but we've done enough of that. We know that everyone around the world now cares about climate change. We've seen that 80% number. So let's now show them the solutions. And importantly, from a brand perspective, let's show them how your brand is part of that solution and the work that you're doing to be that change in the world. Very last one, authentic visuals. Including kind of engaging images of people. Animals are great. Everyone loves a dog picture. Just making sure that we're avoiding generic sustainability stock photos, the kind of wind farm with a sunset in the background. They just kind of start to feel like wallpaper to people in a little while. So focusing on people's faces, everyone enjoying a fantastic and exciting future together is a really great way to pull people into your message. I always like to say, make the party so fun that everyone wants to come. Let's not be boring and earnest all the time. We can be funny, we can be silly, we don't have to be kind of deep and dark and in the weeds all of the time. I've included links to a few brands that I think do some of these principles really well in their marketing. So, by all means, please go and check them out. Um, Etty is a personal favorite. Their founder does really fantastic, like completely organic, pretty low quality, often selfie videos where he just talks about what's happening with the company, why it matters, what they're doing well, where things are hard, what some of the barriers are to them being more sustainable. I really love the way they communicate. I think it's kind of best in class. Who Gives a Crap Toilet Paper, equally fantastic. So funny, actually makes you laugh out loud. And it's a sustainable choice that makes you feel good about the world. And then specifically to the outdoor industry, Alpaca Raft do a really good job of talking about why sustainability matters to the next generation, which we know is a really powerful driver of people making sustainable choices. And Nemo Equipment does really well at tying their sustainability messaging back to their company mission, being really transparent and showing that sustainability is a foundational value, not just kind of a box that they're checking. So I am going to leave it there for now. I've spoken quite a bit today about the importance of sharing your why and making it clear to your audience why sustainability matters to you. I thought I should walk the talk and show you why sustainability matters to me. These are my kiddos, and my favorite thing in the world is just spending time with them outdoors. And I desperately want to protect our beautiful mountains, our snow, our amazing forests, so that they can continue to live this lifestyle that I've felt incredibly blessed in my life to lead. So that's my everyday why. Um, that's it from me. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope it's been helpful, and I would love to hear questions if you have any.
Thank you so much, Allie. I'm just going into my host tools here. So if folks want to, they can unmute themselves if they like to ask a question out loud. Otherwise, you can also type your question into the chat. I know what you said was really resonated with me, Allie, in terms of you know, getting to what someone actually cares about, right? I think it's very similar in environmental reporting or writing journalism. Don't
Yeah.
talk about the bigger picture, talk about the individual who's directly affected by that and lead with their story. If you don't have a human or local element to it, it's really hard for people to care.
100%. Yeah, when you can put a face to the impact, it's really, really powerful.
Well, and I have a question to start with too, if no one else is going to start. I've definitely heard the term green hushing, I think probably through you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a pretty new term that we've seen a lot of in the last 12 months. I think particularly driven by the wind back of a lot of the climate and sustainability regulations in the US. A lot of brands are going quiet. I think concerned about maybe poking their heads up over the parapet too much and drawing attention to themselves in a way that they're worried might feel negative. So what we're actually seeing, it's really interesting that most companies are continuing with their sustainability work, and some of them are even doubling down on it, but they're just not talking about it. But where that leaves us is then kind of in this spiral of silence. If we feel like nobody around us is having these conversations, we start to believe that it doesn't matter to other people. And then we feel weird about bringing it up, so we don't talk about it. So I think it's really important to consider ourselves as playing a role in breaking that spiral of silence because people do care.
Vince just chimed in, wanting to know what does a truly sustainable outdoor industry look like in 10 years' time?
Oh, wow. Geez, Vince,
It's a banger,
coming in
Vince.
with the softballs.
Vince comes from a media and marketing background, actually, so he's an insider.
Love this question. I think you could look at it in so many different ways. You could look at it in a product way. You could look at it in a marketing way. You could look at it in a distribution way. Like there's so many angles that we could address this question from. Um, because of my background, I think I'm just so passionate about people talking about this topic because the more we talk about it, the more we realize that it's incredibly normal and that all of us share these concerns. So for me, a truly sustainable industry is one that talks authentically about what they're doing, that acknowledges their imperfections, acknowledges the barriers to being perfectly sustainable, because there are many. And there's often trade offs and difficult choices that need to be made that, we don't always share with our customers and clients. So, yeah, for me, I think it's that authenticity.
Thank you. Well, I'm snickering because along those lines, something that Core's executive director Kevin Pennick and I were talking about is there's another term that we've heard lately called maple washing. So this
Mm.
is brands claiming to be Canadian that actually aren't. Has that come across your radar?
It came across my radar this morning. I pulled my spinach out of the fridge and it had a great big Canadian maple leaf on it. And it turns out it was a product of Portugal, maybe. I kind of definitely not Canada either way, but they put it in the plastic bag in Canada. So, yes, it is coming across so much. And I imagine that there's a lot of companies out there right now that would like to be Canadian. So, they're trying to jump on the bandwagon.
Nice. I've got a question coming in from Louisa Freeman. She said, Ellie, from your experience at POW, have you seen outdoor brands effectively leveraging climate conscious athlete voices to promote their sustainability efforts?
That's a great question. Um, some, and I think the smaller brands tend to do well with that. The larger ones, I think, tend to use organizations like POW to be the voice on their behalf. And that might be because they find it to the point of green hushing, maybe a little bit tricky to talk about these topics. I would like to see some of the bigger brands in the outdoor industry take a little bit of a stronger stand on some of these issues. Um, I think the other thing is that it's really hard for athletes. There are some fantastic ones out there. Nikolai Shermer, if you follow him on Instagram, is crushing it right now with his climate communication. He's just so good at it. But they get such a hard time for raising these topics. It's unbelievable the amount of negativity and online abuse that the athletes get when they bring this stuff up. And for the most part, they tend to do it on a voluntary basis. It's really hard for them. Their entire income is built on their profile and their reputation. So when they feel like they're getting like all of this shit online, basically from people, it feels really worrying for them about, is raising their voice safe? Are they going to lose sponsorships as a result of it? So there's a real tension there, I think, where, every athlete that I've met through this work cares really deeply about this stuff and lives with this tension where it can be very hard to talk about.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's almost like sometimes it's easier for them to kind of just walk the walk as opposed to talking the talk.
Yeah,
So they're more, they're showing that element of themselves through their actions and how they conduct themselves. I know we're lucky to have Leah Evans here in the Kootenay region in Revelstoke. She's a Patagonia athlete. She's a ski mountaineer and skier, and she actually puts on events locally that are part of this movement towards reuse and recycle and refurbish our outdoor gear and apparel, which is something very near and dear to Core's heart as well. Core is working towards the same initiatives. So that's always
yeah,
inspiring.
Leah's awesome. So, and there are many. I don't mean to kind of diss the athletes, by the way. I think there are so many that are doing that kind of work. And it really depends on who their sponsors are and how willing those sponsors are to kind of let them use their voice in that way.
Right, when your sponsor is Patagonia, it's
Yeah, it makes it a little easier.
yep.
Exactly. Or you get to move to a beautiful place and start a regenerative farm and, yeah, live your values.
Yeah, that's you're talking about Chris.
Yep.
All right, so well, I think that's almost a wrap. Let me just give a little conclusion here, and again, a thank you to Allie and a thank you to everyone for participating. This does conclude our core outdoor speaker series for the month of February. We'll be back again in March, probably the last week in March. You can look for details on that through Core's social feeds, or better yet, get hooked up with their email newsletter. We have a speaker that I'm also very excited about for March. It's Chris Stone. So Chris worked for Arc'teryx, the North Face, Burton, before finding his way to the Kootenay region and taking a job as the senior designer with Durston. So keep an eye out for details on that and how to register. All right, I'm going to go ahead
Perfect.
and close us off, signing off the meeting. Thanks again, everyone.
Thanks.
Until next time.
Thanks, Jamie.